Greetings, Inland Empire, and welcome to yet another edition of Political Empire. I'm your host, Kim Pierceall, with the Press Enterprise and PE.com, and we've got quite the show for you today. A little bit later, we're going to be talking about the super influence of super PACs in the Inland Empire, and we're going to have our Washington, D.C. correspondent and Sacramento correspondent to talk to us a little bit about what's going on there. And also, we're going to talk about election year bloopers. One of the candidates who's running for Congress recently perhaps inadvertently posted some of his outtakes from a campaign commercial, and those were seized on by his challenger. So we're going to take a look at that campaign commercial based on some of those outtakes from that commercial. Finally, we're going to wrap it up with commentary from our very own Dan Bernstein, who's going to talk a little bit about Joe Baca's bill to remove funding from Los Angeles World Airports if they don't give up Ontario International Airport within 60 days. But first, headlines. Romney is maybe stopping by Riverside soon. He has penciled in a stop on his calendar to the Victoria Club on June 1st. Details aren't final, but obviously if he stops by, we'll be there and we'll keep you posted. Lock your doors if you happen to be a Washington, D.C. politician. Recently, Jerry Lewis, as well as quite a few other members of Congress, had their offices robbed, and among the items stolen in Jerry Lewis's office in April, 4 autographed baseballs, a crystal paperweight, commemorative wines, and also bookends that were apparently made out of the actual Capitol steps. So some valuable items, and I don't think they've caught anyone yet. Election day is June 5th, just a reminder, not June 4th. And Mike Gardner, who's a councilman for Riverside, who's running for mayor there, is very aware of the fact that the election is June 5th, after quite a few people pointed out that his campaign mailers did indeed say that the election was June 4th. So just to clarify, election day is indeed June 5th. And finally, a pot proposition. There is a medical marijuana facility in Temecula that is considering adding a local ballot initiative in order to reopen its doors. So we'll see how that goes and see what happens. And now on to our segments. We'll be right back with our correspondents, Ben Goad and Jim Miller from Washington, D.C. and Sacramento, to talk a little bit about the super PACs. We're back to talk about the super influence that super PACs are having on the inland region this election. And with us today are 2 of our correspondents, one in Washington, D.C., Ben Goad, and in Sacramento, Jim Miller. Ben and Jim, thanks so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Kim.
Fantastic. And obviously they're here by phone, not in studio, alas. But leading up to the election, they've written a story about how there has been an insane influence of super PAC funding coming into the Inland Empire. And Ben, curious, how much money is flowing into the local races here?
Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars so far, and we haven't even gotten to the primary yet. The best local example that we found was in the 31st Congressional District, where outside spending has topped $900,000, and that includes more than $700,000 alone from the National Association of Realtors in support of Congressman Gary Miller. Miller's main opponents, Pete Aguilar and Bob Dutton, have also got money from super PACs.
Interesting, yeah, and we talked about how they were actually listing Gary Miller's district as his current one, not the one that he's running for, which is kind of funny. And Jim, curious, there's a vaguely named independent expenditure committee that has been contributing quite a bit of money to the 31st Senate District race. What do we know about this group? What can you tell us about this super PAC?
Right. I mean, there's an independent expenditure committee called the California Senior Advocates League that last week began showing up on the reports to the Secretary of State's office. We don't know a whole lot about their more recent sources of funding. In their last report, through the end of December, they got some money from the Personal Insurance Federation of California and a second independent expenditure committee that's linked to the California Chamber of Commerce. Since that time, there have been a couple other independent expenditure committees who have shown up in the district. So, and you know, it's, I think, like Ben was saying, there's 2 weeks to go, and we'll probably be seeing some more.
And are these new ones just as mysterious?
There is something called the California Alliance for Progress in Education, an alliance of professionals, employees, and small business that has similarly opaque sources of funding. We may find out some more later this week when there's a campaign finance deadline, and you know, lots of committees will have to show some information about their fundraising.
Well, I'm curious, there's another one, Ben, called Restoring Our Community. Who is supporting that, and what do we know about them?
Well, again, this is one of these committees that's a new super PAC, and we're not going to know who its donors are until after the next campaign finance figures come out. They have spent a little more than $85,000, so a pretty significant chunk of change in support of Pete Aguilar in the 31st, who's running against Gary Miller.
And speaking of Pete Aguilar, his campaign went a little bit viral by posting a video on YouTube using outtakes from Gary Miller's campaign commercial. And we've actually got that commercial. We're going to show it right now. It's about 1:25.
And I'm ready to keep fighting for Washington. I'm Congressman Gary Miller, and I'm running for Congress. Since that doesn't work, I worked hard day and night to make you're getting too high on me. Yeah. With a lot of hard work, it's getting up too high on me. When I going up high, I'm chasing it. I'm Congressman Gary Miller. I fought the growth. It was below the screen this time. Okay. You're running. That keeps us from creating jobs and from hard work. And that keeps us from creating jobs for hardworking people. Thumb like that better? Yeah. Okay. And Washington politicians seem to think the way the problem. And I'm ready to keep fighting for Washington.
Now, Ben, do we know how Aguilar's campaign got a hold of that footage?
Well, we know what he's saying. He says that this was publicly available on a YouTube station that they found. And, it's important to note that there are several other candidates in the race, but these guys have begun sniping at one another a little bit.
And as far as Miller's reaction, what did he have to say about his outtakes being used in a campaign commercial against him?
Yeah, it was kind of surprising, I thought. Miller said he got a big kick out of it, and even though the ad contains negative commentary about Miller, he posted the entire thing on his own website, front and center, so I think he's just rolling with it.
Quite the sense of humor. Well, Ben, thanks so much for being with us today, and Jim in Sacramento, thanks again for telling us all about super PACs and also the election year bloopers. We'll hopefully talk to you again soon about everything that's going on. And next, we're going to have commentary from Dan Bernstein, speaking of a sense of humor, who's going to tell us a little bit about Representative Joe Baca's proposal to cut the FAA funding for Los Angeles World Airports if they don't hand over Ontario International Airport.
There's a growing sentiment that Ontario Airport is in the death grip of Los Angeles. And there's a prairie fire of rebellion, too. Set Ontario free, cry the rebels. Turn it over to a local authority before it withers and dies. Everybody's on the bandwagon, including politicians. The latest, Joe Baca, the Rialto congressman. He's proposed a bill that gives Los Angeles World Airports 60 days to turn Ontario Airport over to a local authority. If they don't, LA loses billions in federal funds. Will this work? Ordinarily, I'd say no. But Joe Baca has a track record of getting huge bipartisan support in a bitterly divided Congress. Just last month, the House voted 373-4 for a Baca bill to award a gold medal, congressional gold medal, to Jack Nicklaus, the famous golfer. This is no isolated incident. In 2009, after huge House support, the United States Senate unanimously passed a Baca bill to award a congressional gold medal to Arnold Palmer, another famous golfer. Well, what does this say about the Ontario bill? Well, it turns out that Nicklaus, Palmer, and the Ontario Airport have a lot in common. I like this bill's chances. Let's take a look. Nicklaus and Palmer are retired. At the present rate of passenger drop-off, Ontario will be retired too. Nicholas and Palmer were frequently below par. Ontario has been below par for years. Arnold Palmer is famous for his charges. Well, Ontario is famous for its charges too. Ticket prices are higher there than almost any other airport in the area. But there are some cons too, some turbulence. Nicholas and Palmer are used to attracting huge galleries. When's the last time Ontario ever attracted a huge gallery, even at Christmas or Thanksgiving? Nicholas and Palmer were frequently in the fairway, but fewer and fewer planes at Ontario ever make the runway. When Nicholas and Palmer were at the tee, the ball took flight, but hardly anything takes off or takes flight in Ontario. Nicholas and Palmer were masters around the green. Ontario's much more comfortable in the red. So there you have it, the pros and the cons. Ordinarily, I'd say this bill wouldn't have a chance. But when the leader in the clubhouse is Joe Baca, hard-driving Joe Baca, I rate this bill as 50-50.
Thanks so much, Dan, for your always insightful commentary, and we'll be back next week, the week before the election. So be sure to keep posted on PE.com and read the Press Enterprise for the latest political news every day and every week. Thanks so much.